Okay, so in the last video I created the box example and I assembled all of it and I used the mate connectors but then also fastened mates, and that's how I actually put those together. And what I'm going to show in this video is how to take all of these axle parts and put them into an assembly and lock them into place. Now, this is all part of One Part Studio. Onshape has this very strong positive, which is that you can actually CAD things very easily so that things relate to each other. So if I were to change, for example, the size of this axle here, make it bigger or smaller, it's actually going to show up in my next, the other parts as well. Makes it much more flexible, makes it much more easy to edit. That's really great. We're going to bring this into yet another assembly, because even though those parts and pieces look like they're together, they're not quite together. I'm going to rename this, so this is going to be my axle example. And again, we're going to start by inserting individual parts. And actually, I might show you the other way. Since these are all part of One Part Studio, I can actually put those all in together. And if you want to, you can. It is not always the easiest thing to do. I'm going to lock and fix the kind of central main portion of my part. I consider that my axle right here. And you're going to notice something. Not only do I not have any mate connectors, but if I click and drag on any of these parts, they move around. And the goal is going to be that they don't do that. We are going to lock this into place. This is all going to be glued so that when this is rotated, the axle rotates and everything else rotates. And even the cams that we're going to eventually put on here will also rotate. I'm going to start from the one end. I've already fastened or fixed this, so I can look at my next part, and it seems to make sense to start at this end, or rotate and work on that end as well. So what I'm going to do is create those mate connectors, and again I'm finding the plane, mousing over the plane, and then I'm going to find the center of that, because I know that that is going to line up with the center of this plane right here, and this face as we call it. So I'll create another one like so, mouse over it and click. It creates a plane that's normal, where the Z is normal to that face, so that's all good. It looks like they are oriented correctly. I did make them all as part of One Part Studio, so they should be oriented the same way. And again, I'm going to use the fasten mate to put those two together. That's all good. I'm going to go through, and on the next one I'm going to create another mate connector, and again it's going to be through the center, so mouse over this plane, but then through the center of this hole right here. Then I can right click and drag so I can find and see this clearly, but I'm going to put my mouse over this plane. Oh, I gotta hit OK. I always forget that. So I'm going to mouse over and then find that, and I'm just going to hit OK every time I get a good mate connector. So I'll do that. I can go ahead and create those fasten mates. So I'm selecting those two mate connectors, and I'm going to hit solve and call it all good. And so far, these parts I can tell are not rotating or anything. And then from there, I'm going to create another mate connector. Now this time it's not over here on that other face, but I know from here it's going to go all the way through and end up right at that point. So I'm going to create that mate connector in the middle there. I'm going to do the same thing right here. And again, they're oriented correctly, so it's all good. This will seem a little repetitive. You're going to get so good at this that you can do it without even really thinking. Okay. So right now I've got all these parts and pieces, and I would glue these together so they don't rotate independently of each other, and so therefore I'm going to use those fasten mates. Now the next thing I'm going to put in are the cams, and in order to do that I'm going to have to actually go to my box example, and I want to measure something. So I'm going to measure from the center here to the outside here. So I selected the center and then from here. So from the center axis distance I have 1.5. So it's 1.5 inches from there. I can also measure the same thing. So from this edge to the center here, my center distance is 3.5. Okay, a good thing to know about that, so I'll keep that in mind. Alright, so that means there's 2 inches in between here. It's all good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take I've got my cam, and I'm going to put it into my axle assembly. And I'm going to insert, I'm going to look through all of my parts in my part studio. I'm going to have 2 of these, and just for speediness sake, I'm going to put those both in together. Okay, so here I'm going to put in another mate connector, and I'm going to line them up with this side. I could do the other side, but I like this one. And I'm going to see if I can zoom in and find the center of, the middle of this, because I'm really worried about the middle of this actually lining up, so I can actually select that and create one centered within my my cam. Okay. I'll also create another one over, I already have a mate connector over here, so that's all good. So what I'll do is, again, fasten mate, because they are already connected, and I want them kind of glued together. And this one's going to be a little unique in that I'm going to actually offset this a certain distance. And that blue axis, that z-axis, you can see it's blue right here, is the one that actually travels all the way through here. So I want to translate, just like you see in math class, we want to translate along that a certain distance. I've already gone through and measured, and I know that this is 1/2 inch, and then I need to go an additional 1.5 inches to get to the center of that hole that we have. So this part right here was actually going to line up with the outside of my box. So I've got the 1/2 inch to get to the outside of my box, and then 1.5 inches to get to the center of where that cam should be. So I'm going to type in 1.5. I'm not worrying about the inches because I'm already, that's my unit for this particular project, so it's all good. And then if that were to go in the wrong direction, I can actually make this a negative number, and it'll go in that opposite direction. So I'm going to click on that, and there we go. I've got that offset. Oh, I was wrong. Not 1.5 inches, because this is 1/2 inch right here. You'll have to measure your own. I'm going to actually do 1.5 inches plus 1/2 inch, and that gets me to 2 inches. So that should give me that correct offset. I'll hit OK and call it good. Okay. So now I've got this one. Whatever my handle is here, this will be vertical. And then I'm going to put in this other cam. And again, I'm going to grab my mate connector. I'm going to try to find the center one right here. And then hit OK. And then from there, I'm going to put this in, but I'm going to put this in so it's off by 90 degrees. It's rotated compared to this one 90 degrees, and I'll show you how to do that. So I've got my fasten mate, so I'll grab that one. I've already got this mate right here. And then what I can do is do that same offset. It is 2 inches plus an additional 2 inches, so it's actually 4 inches. So it's 2 inches to the center of this, to the center of where I want it. Let's see what that looks like. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to rotate around this z-axis. So that's going to stay in place, and I'm going to rotate around that. So I'm going to grab my rotate around z and change it to 90 degrees. And I picked Z because that's the one that's kind of my center axis of that. So I've got my Z. I rotate it around 90 degrees. That looks good. You can guess and check here. If you click kind of in these areas where there isn't anything going on, you can kind of preview and see what it's going to look like. And so that looks pretty good as far as I want. You can always flip or rotate along here as well, but then you've got the rotate a certain number of degrees. 90 degrees, fourth of a circle. I could pick some even as different as 45, but for my design it's going to be 90. 90 makes the most sense. Okay, so there we go. I'll hit OK and approve that. And now I have my second subassembly, my axle example. I'm going to move that over by my box example. I'm going to put those at the beginning so that my next video I can show you how to put these two together in a good logical way.